Next, I would like to welcome Meeri on stage. She's the CEO and co-founder of Saidot, a startup that's basically focused on responsible AI ecosystems and on creating that transparency and giving companies and organizations the tools for systematic AI governance and monitoring. And she will be talking about, is there a business in AI ethics? Meeri.
Yes, thank you. AI also changes how we behave, and today people are learning how to, or try to educate themselves on how to behave, for example, in a recruiting process, a screening process, because we know that AI is being used heavily in screening. I was thinking when I saw this video by Nitin on Joy's work, and I had a chance to test one of those Microsoft's facial recognition. It was actually very new that time, and then it analyzed my face, and the outcome was first actually it gave my age. I'm around 40. That gave that correctly. Then I tried again, and when I put a big smile on my face, I got 10 years out of my age. So ever since I've been trying to smile because I'm in this middle-age crisis. So that helps a little bit. All right, but pleasure to be here, and it's nice to speak as the last speaker from this first set, and you could basically frame your speech by commenting the previous speeches because there were so many interesting perspectives. For me, it's super exciting to have this session. I was in the last session a couple of years ago, I think, when it was, and already then I was very impressed by the fact that we are bringing together faith, science, and business into the room. It's pretty rare, especially the faith aspect, to have represented. So thank you for all the organizers for that one. So I'm Meeri Haataja. I'm entrepreneur. I've been in AI space whole my career, about 20 years or even more already. But for the last 3.5 years, I've been entrepreneur in the responsible AI space. And I took as a headline of my speech today a question that is that I have sort of love-hate relationship, because during the last 3.5 years, I've been asked dozens and dozens, if not hundreds times, is there business in AI ethics? So in the next few minutes, I will try to explore this question a little bit from different perspective, and trying to bring now into this conversation this business perspective from a couple of sides. What I've learned during the clients when we're working with large enterprises and in different industries and small AI companies building AI products, or large organizations buying AI products, and then also as an entrepreneur in this area, in constant conversation with investors and potential investors. So, is there business in AI ethics? I would like to first talk about this key point that I think reveals the answer to the question, and it's ethical or ethics is not the feature of an AI system. It's a quality of the process and decisions of those who design, develop, test, and use these systems. Quality of the process and decisions of people who design, develop, test, and use AI systems. We have been, thank you Nitin also for introducing all these principles, because it's really important. I particularly like this. We collaborated with one student from MIT, Maya Murad, and I really encourage you to go to Maya's blog post, because she has an incredible skill to structure things in a very understandable way, and particularly what I like here in this model, how she puts these principles that are very familiar for anyone who has been working in the area, is that there are two kinds of principles over here. So instead of being ethical, an AI system, it can have these qualities of being fair, being safe, robust or secure or upholding privacy. And when we discuss with enterprises, actually, according to some one recent study, 78% of enterprises or leaders in enterprises who are deploying AI find it critically important that the AI that they deploy is fair, safe, and reliable. And these are principles that we can assess. But in order to do that, we need some other principles, and there we talk about transparency. We need to understand how these systems work, how they have been built, how they have been governed. We need to have accountability, which has been emphasized in this session already many times before me, and meaning that we need to have these regulations, mechanisms to, for example, use auditing to actually validate and examine the types of AI that we build and how do they operate. And in order to operate this responsible AI, we need to understand that if we create harms with these technologies, we need to also be able to tackle with the harms or fix and correct and have these mechanisms of actually carry the responsibility of also the potential negative impacts. So you see that when we go from the center towards the outer circle, we start to talk about relatively practical things about how do we actually achieve these ideals which are in the center circle here. What do we want to, how do we act so that we make ethical decisions while developing and using AI systems? In enterprise setting, processes are the means for ensuring consistent performance in a given domain. In AI, the process for ensuring these qualities of the outcomes is AI governance process. And this is actually something that what has happened during this 3.5 years that I've been in space. We have actually figured that there is this enterprise process that is the means to do or help increase the odds of doing good decisions while developing and using AI systems. AI governance is the process of overseeing the responsible application of AI and its impacts on all relevant stakeholders. Organizations who deploy AI governance, and this is something that what we see while working with organizations from public sector to private sector, that's where businesses navigate. So starting to work on this, and there can be different drivers for this one. I was really excited about Taina's presentation and the concept of merciful community, reflecting from my experience that fear is one of the very strong drivers at the moment for many organizations to start acting on these topics. And I'm not sure if that's the most positive or good driver, but that's a driver that is currently influencing, especially the public sector work towards a more responsible and ethical use of AI. But when talking about businesses and private sector, there are several other drivers for organizations to establish AI governance, putting in AI governance in place. And that can be customers' interest, procurement, growing procurement requirements, what we are seeing at the moment. So organizations who understand that big part of their AI or the AI that they use is actually procured from outside third parties, have already started to think about how do we maintain this accountability, how do we use these third-party technologies in a responsible manner, and what do we need to know about these systems in order to be able to assess and understand. So there are growing requirements for companies who sell AI to enterprises to answer to these questions. So procurement is something that drives companies acting on these topics. Of course, regulation is one of the strong drivers, and that already in Europe especially, we are seeing organizations to take action to prepare for what is coming with the AI Act and the related regulations. That applies to other geographies as well. these are basically what you see in the slide is the typical areas that we need to take care of when we're talking about AI governance. So that's a process which helps you understand, apply the AI policies, understand what are the requirements for this specific type of system in this geography that we need to respect while developing AI. And that comes heavily from the principles that we discussed earlier. AI governance defines the way how do we, every single time we develop a system on a higher risk area of AI applications, how do we assess, how do we test, and how do we monitor these systems over time, and what are the practices to do that. That is the way, that defines what kind of, how do we manage the third-party suppliers in this area, and how do we ensure that their AI has been developed in a responsible manner. It creates structures for continuous review and potentially auditing, but also engagement with third parties, the different stakeholders who need to be involved in order to have a solid, responsible process. And finally, it integrates communication and transparency into how these systems are built and used. And now when we're talking about this process, we understand that process can be measured, its performance can be improved as well. We can measure, for example, how much time does it take to, to run this process, what are the outputs, what kind of outputs, and how many outputs we have from the process, what's the efficiency of the enterprise process of doing this governance, the throughput time of the process, and especially what is the quality of the outcomes, reliable products, higher quality products, for example, satisfies customers, compliant products, ethical decisions. And finally, what kind of bigger outcomes are we driving with this, running this kind of process? And trust is one of the most wanted outcomes of putting in place governance, and that's what is driving I would say majority of enterprises at the moment to take these actions. A willingness to gain trust of their customers and key stakeholders. And then interesting question, what we are talking when talking with enterprises and businesses operating AI governance is that how do we do this in a high quality and efficient manner? There are scarce resources always, so how do we manage this process, which is a very important process, but how do we do that efficiently? How can we find, how do we find and test the data sets effectively? How do we ensure the systematic approach across all the applications, both in-house and externally developed, and so forth and so forth? So there is a business problem that needs to be answered. And of course, when there's a problem, there's a way to build new businesses and new opportunities. This is actually a super new landscape. It's an ethical AI startup landscape. So there is business in AI ethics, or many companies, not only Saidot, which we are happy to be in the map. There were actually 3 Finnish companies in the map, but also a lot of other companies. And basically the target of these companies are new enterprises is to make this enterprise or government organizations AI governance process higher quality and more efficient. In practice, or this is how they say in the report, that we are seeing the emerge of ethics stack for AI, and basically from these different layers of this ethics stack, you can then, or enterprises start to pick their choices and build this technology stack of managing AI governance. I will finish my talk by showing just quickly what is it what can it be in practice from the work of Saidot perspective. So our focus, what we do is basically to try to help organizations do AI governance in the most high quality and efficient manner. That means we're building SaaS platform that organizations of different sizes can take into use in order to increase their odds of doing good decisions throughout all the decisions that they do related to developing or using AI. We help organizations, for example, understand the AI policies, requirements that are in place for different areas, different geographics, and get hold of those concrete requirements there. Portfolio management, like it's easy to do this once or ad hoc basis, but when you actually need to be able to handle and manage your whole portfolio, that becomes a management and portfolio management problem. So our platform helps organizations to apply the same systematic approach across their all own systems and third-party systems. These systems are such that they change over time. So this whole model monitoring and capability to connect your governance into what actually happens with the system in production is super important. And for that reason, we are integrating with machine learning operations platforms to get any meaningful change data from those platforms to the people who are governing these systems and allow them to act from governance perspective on any meaningful or important changes. And finally, it can productize and make it easy for organizations to create that transparency in a meaningful manner. And we know that transparency is a very contextual question. We cannot provide, for example, source code for a regular citizen who wants to understand how government uses AI towards them. So we need to be able to provide transparency into these systems in a different manner depending on the audiences. So that's also an area where we need to find efficient ways to actually provide that understandable and meaningful transparency. So with this, I'm coming back to my initial question and really claiming that as soon as we understand that ethical AI is about operating an enterprise process which helps people and organizations to do good decisions, we recognize that there is a problem that needs to be answered, and always there is a business in answering good business questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Meeri.